Yeah, okay, right. Foundry Foundation technical oversight for the 15th of November 2022. Agenda this week is reasonably sparse. Just a review of actions from last week. I'll look at the PRs, any other business, no working group updates today. We'll get back on that next week, and then any other business. I've only got the one PR in today. So if anybody wants to add any others, but this seemed like the most important one to talk about. Actions from last week then, Chris was going to go talk to VMware about the cost of additional capacity in GitHub Actions, but Chris is out this week, so no update there. I said I was going to go find the numbers for GitHub Actions usage. I have them, but we have 600 and something repos, so it is proving difficult to visualize that in a useful way, because apparently Google Sheets doesn't really want to do a line chart with 600 lines. So I'm trying to find a better way. I'll hopefully have that for next week when Chris is here. So that should all come together nicely. PRs then, 449. So this is the RFC for branch protection. So last week we made a call, final call for comments, and we've had some. So Marcella was saying that she's not comfortable with it as it's proposed, because they have so few approvers in that working group that holidays and sick leave and whatnot could kind of screw them over, because they will regularly find themselves dipping below the threshold for approvers, and it'll become a blocker for them. How do people feel about that? Is this a thing you're seeing in your own working groups? Is this a thing you've seen in the working groups before?
I mean, we were trying to address this by setting what we thought would be reasonable thresholds for the number of approvals, given the pool of approvers, right? But she's saying effectively that because of some temporary absences, they're effectively with fewer active approvers in this particular area. And so it sounds like even if even though they would normally have enough people to satisfy the requirement, if there's even one more unexpected vacancy or absence, then the last remaining person wouldn't be able to do any work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's enough people with, like, the working group leads should have admin access on those repos, so they should be able to override those things.
According to the RFC, not.
Oh no.
And also
Okay.
no, only bots. That's what is written. And the typical GitHub configuration, yeah, you have the option to configure it that also admins normally cannot override it. Of course, as an admin, I can change the configuration, and then yeah. So, but it's. I think it's for good reasons, not that easy. Yeah, the typical admin trap.
Yes.
Ruben, were you thinking that they'd be able to override the protection rules on a particular PR to merge it as the admin?
Yeah,
or
like
that,
I mean, like if because this sounds like I mean, yeah, I can always think of a scenario that wouldn't work, right? Like, and that's why we have different layers of responsibility, so that in those edge cases we can still unblock people. But I mean, like, I don't see, like, if you want to take these things into account, like how you would be able to make any rules.
So just as an example, so we work in our normal work at SAP with this one approver role, and I haven't seen any occasion where I wasn't able to commit something. Yes, I have to ask sometimes, please approve, etc. But there is a way. And what I added in addition is that, let's say, if there is a longer period of planned vacation or job rotation or whatever, and you don't want to change the area approver assignments, and maybe it's a possibility to add some manual configuration to override the number of approvers that is needed. I guess we need anyway a way to specify branch protection configuration values per project explicitly, and then only generate the non-explicitly configured projects or values, because there's also all these required checks, etc. That's something that some teams, I guess, want to use, and we should offer a means to do that, and that could be a way out of this discussion. Yeah. We could
probably do that as a second pass.
With Beyhan, we started a little bit to experiment with the tool. So the tool is running meanwhile, and we have set up one project to play around, but it's too little. There's one thing that is missing already, and that we need in order to continue with the automation. That's you cannot set with a branch protector tool the teams that are allowed to bypass the PR rule, which is needed for bots. This is something missing. It seems to be a newer feature. So I think Beyhan wanted to ask at the tool, open a bug, and maybe we contribute there or whatever. I don't know, but this is needed before we can really use the tool. So it's anyway a few months ahead.
Yeah,
I would say. Or we find another tool.
Yeah. At least that forces us to have some time to reflect on this, at least.
Speaking of bots, when I'm just looking at the RFC draft, when we say like only bots may push directly to the bench, would that be the bots for the working group? I forget what levels we have bots defined at. If we have
working group bots and we have area bots. I would say both. Otherwise,
yeah. Okay, that would make
sense. You have a bot, yeah.
Okay, we might want to clarify that language. Because there's no hard distinction between bots and other user accounts. That's just a distinction we've made in the structure of the permissions for each working group.
I think everything is here fine as long as it is specified in the charters. Then I would say that's.
So if we were to allow. So we were to continue down the route of saying, if you had, how was it, 4 approvers and above, 3 approvers and above, requiring 1 approval, and you were a team with, as Marcella's got, with 5 approvers, and it's easy to find yourself in a situation where actually you only have 2 or 3 people working, and it starts to cause a blocker for you. They went and then overrode that on their repository for the time being. Wouldn't we run into a problem of that getting somewhat randomly reverted when something in this repo gets merged and all of that, the branch protection code runs again?
You would overwrite it in a config file in the community repo,
right? And
that means, of course, approval of a workgroup lead and potentially the TOC, and then it's persistent, and hopefully the workgroup lead reverts this change when the people are back in the when the area is big enough again. So it's a well-reviewed and persistent change.
We definitely would want a consolidated declarative description of any of those override rules.
But that's possible with this branch protect. That's somehow natural. It falls into similar what we have today with the repo configuration. I mean, that's also explicitly specified, right? Whether it's archived, what is the main branch, and things like that. That's this file, and we just add additional configuration for the teams.
So my concern is that they'd have to raise a PR to remove this requirement for a period of time. I can't imagine we would write a bunch of code to then reapply after a certain period of time. So there's going to have to be 2 PRs. If we're going to do that, I think we need to allow for working group leads to approve it and merge it without waiting on anybody else, because at the point where they're doing this, they're already sort of not under pressure necessarily, but like they've already got blockers. They don't need more blockers.
Yeah. That leads us to the interesting question: how do we branch protect the community repo?
Wow.
I hope we apply the same rules, because
Christ,
then we know
yeah.
they are fine. And one approver, I mean, TOC has 5, you have all the working group leads that can technically work as an approver in the community repo. That should be enough. I
Yeah.
don't see here a problem.
And then
Oh.
how do we go about managing those branch protection rules being turned back on?
This is then in the responsibility of the workgroup lead to really file the PR. If you apply for an exception, you should. Yeah, I know this is not watertight.
Yeah.
I agree, but I would wait for the problems, and then you can have another check that finds out where the standard configuration diverges. It's possible to do something, but
what would be
think it
nice?
was-
Like,
Sorry, go on.
I mean, if like engineering time would not be like a limitation. It would be nice to take into account like a GitHub status, because you can set a status on GitHub on an account saying that you are away or something. Like if you could have something like that, and you would, for all the contributors, look at their status, or the approvers look at their status, and use that to calculate the required, because it's gonna run on the schedule, right? It's gonna run like every, I don't know, day at least. So if you would take that into account, it would naturally solve that problem.
I think I'd be worried about, let's say you had 3 approvers, and so you required 1 approval. If you were trying to be malicious and merge something in, if you compromised one of those approvers, set the status to away, it immediately, well, not necessarily immediately, but soon enough removes the branch
if they are
protection.
away, it should also temporarily remove them from the teams.
Right.
I mean, like this is far. I mean, just try to.
That's another solution that you can do. The workgroup lead could file a PR and say we demote the 2 approvers in vacation and move them to reviewers. And once they are back, they get without further ceremony the approver role back. And
yeah, but that feels like a bit much, like a really heavyweight system. Like ideally, this would be like a more of a like self-service thing. That's why I was thinking about like the doing it based on a GitHub status, because it has value as well, right? So seeing that someone is away also is nice from a community point of view, because you know, oh, I need to wait a bit longer, or that person is not going to respond. So
maybe I'm solutionizing a bit here.
Comes the next special role. The colleague is not away, but it's just rented over to a different team because there's some escalation running. You know, it can become more and more complex.
Sure.
What if we did something a bit simpler? What if we just had a job that runs once a day, looks at the config file, checks if the branch protection rules have been turned off, like deliberately overridden, and says, you know, if the last change to this that turned it off was over a month ago, raise a PR to re-enable it. And then the working group lead can just close it if they don't, you know, if they're still in that state where they need it overridden. And at least then there's a prompt to think about it every month.
Actually, this is even with the automation already in such a way possible that the workgroup lead has admin rights on the repository. So the workgroup lead can change the real branch protection or rules without further problems and merge the PR. And then after 6 hours, 24 hours, or how often we run the branch protector, it gets reestablished. So it's like a leasing for a certain period. Also a workaround. Maybe it's good enough already for, let's say, and then we wait for feedback and go from there.
Yeah, it feels like too much work to do upfront. We don't know how much it's gonna happen, right? Like I think we can find solutions, but ideally we first get some evidence that it's a real problem.
Maybe then you're right. Maybe we do just propose saying, look, we'll re-establish the branch protection rules once a week and on every PR that changes that file. because with GitHub Actions, we can say like only when this file has changed, and then you can make steps conditional. So if we need to, like, if we end up putting the branch protection rules in the same file as everything else, we can at least say, like, you know, check if this part of the file changed in a step and then exit the workflow early, that kind of thing. Yeah, let's that running it on a regular cadence and on changes feels like
that's
a not
how the
terrible
org
solution.
management currently runs. It runs every 6 hours, and on a change on the charters or on these special configuration files.
Yeah,
and that worked out well.
How long do you think? 6 hours to me feels a bit soon for branch protection rules.
Whatever we can.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, we can also change it to once per day.
Yeah. That was going to be the question. What would feel like a good cadence?
6 hours were just there. I think Ruben configured it like this, and it stayed because nobody. There was no reason to change it.
And I think the reason for 6 hours was because it took like 5 hours to run.
Yeah. Okay, that's the reason. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
well,
another question. I would integrate it naturally into the org management GitHub action, but let's see how long it runs, and maybe we have to do it independently because we exceed the 6 hours. We will see.
Yeah.
But first, we need this extension on the branch protector because without bots, I think people will not like us.
Yeah.
Do we know if that's planned for the branch protection tool?
I have just asked in their Slack channel. So we have a dedicated Slack channel for the Pro tooling. I decided to go over Slack, and if they suggest to open a feature request or something, I don't have an answer yet. We need to wait.
Okay.
But there is a reference to the question in the PR if you want to follow that.
Okay, well, I think what I'll do then is after this, I'll go and propose that as an alternative to Marcella in the thread, clarify the language, and then we'll see where we are on this particular issue next week. Does that sound like a reasonable course of action? Yeah, seeing general assent. Okay, that's the only PR I had written down this week, mostly because I kind of got tied up with other meetings and didn't get a chance to look at the other PRs. Are there any others that people think that we should take a look at? I'm sure there's a bunch of sort of routine stuff we need to look at.
I created a PR, so the Foundry Day recordings are online now, and I like the talk Eric gave there about the evolution of the technical
Is that 475?
governing. Most probably, yeah. Just to check. Yes, yeah. I'm not sure why it's a good place to reference the talk, but I think it will bring value to have it somewhere on our community repo.
Yeah, this seemed like as good a place as any to me, personally. Okay, that's majority and merge done. I think this. Are there any other? I thought there was some that needed our attention in here that I saw, but I might have been looking at just working group stuff.
I think the rest of things are working group. I'm seeing people being suggested as approvers or reviewers, or removing someone, but I think Amelia needs to weigh in on Giuseppe's PR about Mario.
Yep. Yeah, I also asked. So we were waiting on Marcella to rewrite or rephrase some of the working group agreements. I pinged her on that last week. No response at the moment, but give it another couple of weeks and ping again because it's been hanging around for a while now. Any others?
We haven't heard anything about maintenance of Stratos, right?
No, I think last time the update was organizing funding or something. It's in the notes back in time, but yeah, we haven't. Last looks to have been May and October.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe we could even give this through the holidays, but if there's no signs of forward movement, maybe by the beginning of the year, we should determine that nobody's actually stepping up to maintain it and make a decision.
Yeah, that sounds like a reasonable thing to address in what, middle of January, once everybody's back and into gear. Okay. In that case, any other business?
I've been looking into our community repo to find a good place for the talk reference. I noticed that the governance concept on our README.
What has, sorry?
So on the README page in the community.
Oh, I think
repo,
we deleted that file a while ago.
Yes,
because it was
and,
redundant with other things. So we should remove that link.
Yeah,
It's not even informational anymore.
Yes.
And some of these statuses are also, I think, active now. And maybe the change plan is completed because we went through all those transition steps. Okay, so we have some cleanup we could do on the README.
Anybody wanting to volunteer to go through and do that?
I can do that. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, that sounds like action. Okay, it sounds like we have nothing left to go through. So shall we all go get half an hour of our lives back? And enjoy the rest of your day, folks.
See you.
Bye.
See you next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.